The 6-month anniversary of healthcare reform. It was also the day that several key changes kicked in. Here with all the details about how it affects your insurance, because it's very, very important, is our good friend Andrew Rubin from NYU's Langone Medical Center and Sirius XM Dr. Radio. Thanks for being here, Andrew. Appreciate it.
Good to be here.
I think the first thing people need to know is that, especially if they have employer-based healthcare, it may not change because it's grandfathered in. What does that mean for people?
Basically what that means is during healthcare reform, the president said if you like your insurance, you can keep it. So this is a little provision that snuck in there that basically says employers don't have to implement all the changes that we're going to be talking about in a minute. They have to implement some of them, but not all of them. And over time, they'll have to change, but it's going to take a good 8 years to get there.
Not until 2018. That's amazing. I think one of the most important changes that's going to affect at least people I've spoken with is the mandated coverage for adult dependents up to 26. So if you are on your parents' insurance, you can stay on it until you're now 26 years old.
That's a big deal. So dependent children, you could be married and not living in your house, your parents' house, and still be covered. The family can't be covered, but you can be covered. But here's a little catch with the grandfather provision. If you're a child and your employer offers you health insurance and you don't take it because you can't afford it, you still can't go on your parents' policy.
Geez, so the total loophole.
It's a total loophole.
Children no longer denied coverage for pre-existing conditions. What's very interesting is this week alone we've seen major insurers come out and say, all right, then we are not going to allow child-only plans because they're too expensive.
Right.
They're getting around it.
They're getting around it, and the White House is saying, well, you made a commitment to us that you wouldn't do this, so we'll see how this plays out.
Right.
But the intention is to make sure that children don't get, dropped from their parents' health insurance.
One thing that happened a number of times before reform is that people would submit their medical claims and their insurer would drop them. They would look back on their records, they would find something possibly non-related and say, you didn't report this and we can drop you. They can't do that anymore.
They can't do that anymore. If you're honest the way you fill out your insurance forms when you apply for health insurance, they can no longer drop you when you get sick and submit a claim, and they have to keep paying those claims.
That's critical. Preventative care, I mean, we heard the White House say so much. Healthcare reform will save Americans money. It will save this country money. Free preventative care, one of the things that kicks in this week. Is that going to save money in the end? Is that the goal here at least?
Preventative care, we've talked about this on the show, will save money over time. But let's put this into context. Number one, it's not free because you're still paying your premiums for your healthcare insurance. Number two, under grandfathered plans, employers don't have to offer this kind of free care, if you want to call it free care. So co-insurance and deductibles will still apply to those people who are in grandfathered plans, which is a good chunk of Americans.
And on Wednesday this week, the president spoke at the home of someone who had before a limit on their coverage. Now there are no lifetime limits on the amount of health insurance coverage you can have. The president really touted that this week, saying this is a critical change.
Doesn't happen often, but people, when they get, have a catastrophic illness or a newborn is born and they're on their parents' policies, they will quickly hit their lifetime caps, which usually run between $1 and $2 million. It sounds like a lot of money, but when something bad happens, it's not a lot of money. And there are also new rules about annual limits. Not as common, you don't see them as often, but a lot of plans do have annual amounts. And there are new rules that will phase in over time that raise the amount the insurers have to cover every year.
In terms of choosing your doctor, I'm always grappling with in-network, out-of-network. Who can I use that will be covered mainly by insurance? This is changing as well.
This is changing. So under healthcare reform, if you're not in a grandfathered plan, an obstetrician, OBGYN for a woman, or a pediatrician is considered a primary care provider. So if you're in a tightly managed network where you have to be in network, you don't have to go to your primary care physician, internist, to get a referral to go see your OBGYN.
It's such a pain.
It's such a pain. This is a big deal. This should make it easier for a lot of people.
In terms of emergency room visits, those actually really add up. It's also something that really added to the healthcare cost for America in general, because people were going to emergency rooms that didn't have healthcare insurance before. That changes now as well.
This happens to be one of my favorites, but it's a little bit complicated. Essentially, you go to a hospital that's in network, you're going to see an emergency room physician. They may not be in network. So a lot of people were going to the emergency room who thought they were going to an in-network hospital, only to find out the doctor was out of network and they have these large bills that they have to pay. There are new rules, if you're not in a grandfathered plan, that says how the insurance companies have to reimburse the physician. And remember, even if you do see an out-of-network physician in the emergency room, which is not your choice, they can still balance bill you. You also don't need an authorization when you go to the emergency room anymore.
It's interesting when, there will still be bickering over claims. That's still going to exist between people and their insurance companies, but the appeals process has changed in favor of patients when it comes to these claims.
They basically turn the tide. They used to say the insurance company could say, we're denying this claim for whatever reason, and the individual had to fight with the insurance company to get the claim paid. In the interim, they were being chased after by the doctor or the hospital. We turn that around now, and now the insurance company has to pay the claims until the dispute's resolved, and they have to have a published and understood process for appealing claims. Grandfather plans don't apply yet.
That's key here. I mean, a lot of people will have these plans that are grandfathered in, and a lot of this won't change for them. For other people, it will change. Let's open it up to everyone, guys, again. John, to you, 50 million Americans without health insurance still, according to the census.